Hello and good afternoon. My name is Allison LaFerlita. I am the Executive Director for the Nonprofit Resource Hub. I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar, Tricks of the Trade, Improve Your Fundraising ROI, which I'm sure is weighing heavy on everybody's minds right now. If you are not familiar with the Nonprofit Resource Hub, we are a nonprofit organization that provides support, education, and services to nonprofits just like yours. And it is free for a nonprofit to join. And most of our events that our nonprofits are invited to are free to join. And if we do charge, we charge very little. So I would encourage you to please head on over to the nonprofitresourcehub.org website and join if you are not a nonprofit member. You'll be able to take advantage of really great workshops and webinars like this, in-person events that we do, a host of resources that we have available to you. And we do try to help promote our nonprofits. So please go ahead and join. As for today, our speakers are Christine Deska, who is the president and co-founder at BellesBoard, and Darren Port, CEO, founder at Powered by Professionals. They are going to be talking about tricks of the trade, improving your fundraising ROI. Like I said, I know this is weighing heavy on everybody's minds right now. We are thrilled to have them. They are going to provide you with a wellspring of information. That said, if you don't get your questions answered or you want more information from either of them, they have left their contact information in the chat. Please don't hesitate to reach out to them and talk with them. They are really wonderful and supportive members of the NRH and do want to help our nonprofits. They also work with many nonprofits, so you're welcome to speak to them about that as well. If you have any questions about the webinar, the workshop, there will be a recording available in the next few days. We will also be happy to answer any questions you may have. You're always welcome to reach out to me or Kelly Ann Serini in our office, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you as well, if we can. So without further ado, I would like to welcome both Christine and Darren. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for having us, Allison, and definitely thank the Nonprofit Resource Hub for always hosting these amazing webinars. So we will try to share some exciting information, and I think a lot of what we're going to do today is going to reiterate some of the things that we need to be focused on. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to go first to kind of kick things off. Christine's going to jump in and then talk a little more about the boards and how to develop them and how to grow them. And then I'll be chiming in here and there. So that's a little background. Really, 2 seconds on my company. Powered by Professionals is a national events and fundraising firm. And we work with nonprofit organizations for the last 23 years in helping them grow their major events, run walks, galas, concerts, any kind of major fundraising event that you work on. So what is very critical in our work, and we find this with the organizations we work with, is that you have to create a foundation of people and a what do you want to call it? Foundation to actually enable these events to be successful. And how do you do that? Well, we have a process internally, and some of you may have heard about this, and others may not. But we use a basic organizational chart, which a lot of companies use to run their businesses. We use it to help us run our major events. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through that chart for a few minutes to give you an idea of how you identify certain people and what roles you're trying to fill. So let's go to the next slide. So in this chart, this chart again is used to help identify the key people that you want involved in the event. Now, some of the people may already be within your organization, and then others may be outside your organization. What we're looking for is we're looking to the board, we're looking to major donors, we're looking to friends of people on your board, business associates of people on your board. And what we want to do in creating an event is we want to highlight people, right? So to highlight certain people and put them in a position of power, that enables those individuals to help fundraise around your cause. So what we do when we're doing a major event is we like to have 3 key areas within the event. It does not have to look exactly like this. This is just an example. But you want to bring credibility. So if it's a health organization, you want to have a very significant doctor who's respected in the field. If it's in education, it may be someone like a professor or somebody in that vein, or in a high role within the education system. If it's for community human services and things of that nature, maybe a leader who is passionate about the field and has been a leader in the field. So that's somebody who's going to bring credibility. The next piece is going to be we call it the money box. So that person is responsible for raising money, and you have to be very clear with those individuals that you approach for this role. It's critical you lay out what the expectations are of that individual before approaching them to be a potential honoree. And you want to pick someone who's can be successful. So it's on you. If you pick somebody who is not in a position to be successful, then you're basically setting yourself up to fail. Is this easy to do? None of this is easy to do. This is very complicated and very difficult to find people to say yes. But these are the things we need to do, and there are ways that we can work harder. Christine, do you have something to add?
No, I'm just nodding along because I'll touch on many of these elements when we talk about really tapping into the board and leveraging that body of folks to complement all of the strategy around events.
Totally. And I think, to fill that box, we're going to look at past donors to the organization. We had a small organization that had a major donor who came in, made a gift, and a few years back. And when we took over starting to work with them, we asked what the relationship was with that donor. And they were like, well, we haven't really done much. They give every year. And I was like, well, would you be okay if we recognize that donor this year as a special occasion? And by doing that, we then opened up the door to their contacts and their friends and their families. So that can really lead to many good things. Some donors don't want to do it, but they all should be approached at some point and see if they're open to it. Yeah, so that's an executive, a leader within a company who's passionate about your cause is a home run, because they have vendors, partners, people within their company that may want to get behind it. They have their own friends and family. So that's very important. Or a very influential family that has a huge network around them. They don't even have to be the wealthiest family. It just has to be a family that has a direct or indirect connection to the cause and a network around them that will rally. The next piece is that wow factor. This again is not necessary, but if you have it, it adds a lot of excitement. So having that celebrity, athlete, or politician creates interest, and it creates people to talk about the event after the event, before the event, which is going to give you guys more press, more exposure for your organization. And I know there's a lot of things being put in the chat, which I cannot do two things at once. So if there's something important, Christine, feel free to interrupt. So we'll talk now a little bit about the next layer of this chart. And what we're doing here is we're going to see is from these honorees that we've identified, and sometimes you'll have two money box honorees and you'll have one credibility. Sometimes you'll only have a credibility and a wow. But it's really this is just an example of how the perfect roles if you could fill everything the right way. But it doesn't always work out that way. So the next level are co-chairs. And this can be made up of board members. It can be made up of friends of the honorees. It could be a vendor or partner of the honoree. It could be a caregiver or patient that one of the physicians takes care of. It could be a student that one of the leaders deals with, maybe a teacher deals with. And so you want to help the people who you've now brought into the organization to see who they know, so that you don't have to just put the same people in these roles. It's easy to go to your board and just say, hey, Steve and Susie, I know you guys are doing great. You're on the philanthropy, you're the philanthropy group on our board. We want you to be co-chairs. Okay, but they're co-chairs every year, so that you're not getting anything new. So we want to look for new people who have a vested interest and a connection to someone or the cause, and that they'll be willing to do the work. And we have to be clear with what the deliverables are. The deliverables are preparing a list, sending out, creating a letter or an email, communication. We'll provide the materials around that, and we'll help them with their emails and their lists. But it's very critical that they're willing to make that list of vendors, partners, friends, family, others that might want to get behind the initiative, people that have been touched by the cause. We have an event tomorrow night for the Diabetes Research Institute. So we're looking for individuals who've been touched by type 1 diabetes. If they have been, we're interested in getting them to our event, even if it's inviting them as a guest through one of the sponsors who gave back their tickets, so they can now learn more about the organization, become more involved. So these are ways to get more people in the room. The honorary chairs, the last thing here, what I like to do with this is I like to bring back people that have been involved for years, who you want, are going to kind of stay involved, but like by elevating them and making sure people know, oh, Susie and Steve are still involved, they're amazing, and they'll still do something, by giving them some sort of title. It kind of encourages them not to fall off and forget their involvement over the years. And it drives other people to stay involved because they're participating again. So now this is the full org chart. Now what we're going to do here is on events that we're running, not only do we sometimes have these major honorees, and like I said, you may not find all of these, so you have to then compensate in other areas. One idea that we've done very successfully is if it's a health or educational organization is, I know from universities, for example, we'll highlight some alumni. So we'll highlight alumni here that are now doing well in their careers, and it's an opportunity to show, well, our school helped create this, and this is where they are today, and it brings them back in. And it's not as big of an award. They may not even get to speak. They may just get 30 seconds, 45 seconds about them and what they've accomplished. You may create a video that highlights the 3 or 4 honorees. So that'll be at least, a 3 to 4 minute segment as opposed to an 8 to 20 minute segment. So it keeps everything tight, but you can get your point across. It also gets you now a new group of people that are going to go out to their networks. And you're going to show how to grow their networks, how to involve people at their new company, maybe the alumni, people they went to school with 10 years ago. So there's creative ways to maximize their involvement. And you may want to bring back a former award recipient to keep them actively involved and let them present the awards to we're doing that tomorrow night again. Tomorrow night we have a diabetes event. We actually have young individuals attending the event. So those individuals have diabetes. They're either high school students or college students. And some of them have received awards. Actually, all of them have received awards in the past. And they've all been brought back to help run the whole program. So they're helping MC, they're helping present awards, and the whole night's going to be run by like 13 to 20-year-olds. And it should be a really cool energy because that's what, unfortunately, that's juvenile diabetes, and that's the audience that is being affected. So we're bringing them into the front of that event. And then this Compassionate Care Award is a nice way to tie in a teacher or a nurse or someone like that who has been impactful in the process of this cause. And it's a nice way to get them involved. They're also usually a great resource to getting to other families that have a direct passion for what you're working on. So it's another idea there. It is nice to have a well-known MC or a radio or TV person that knows how to follow a script and keep the program moving and brings a personality. So it's something else to consider when you're putting together your event. That can help move the event along. And also that's another thing people talk about. Oh my God, the TV host from NBC was at our event last night. I got to meet them. They were so nice. So it's another thing people are talking about after the event. They get a picture and so on. And then an auctioneer. Now, there are incredible auctioneers out there. We're actually going to do a webinar on this in a few months. We're actually going to have some of them on a webinar. But there are auctioneers you can hire. They get paid a lot of money to actually to raise money. And their personalities are insane. They're jumping all around. They're running off the stage. They have they can talk a mile a minute. And sometimes it's someone else who's like a celebrity that people know doing it, but usually it's a professional if you can afford it, and they bring a lot of energy to the table. And it's important that the development people on your team work with them to line up fundraising people in advance for those events. For those to be successful, you need to have people lined up around the room. I'm kind of jumping around here, but it's an important fact. Make sure you have pre-assigned bidding levels and people that are willing to raise their paddles for those levels if you do an event like that. The committee, this is critical. This can be in a lot of different shapes or forms. You can have a leadership committee. You can have the 10th anniversary committee. You can have host committee, alumni committee. There are all these different things you could potentially do, longtime supporters. This is a great way to get people back that have either lost touch with you and you want to get them back involved, or you want to keep them involved. So you say, oh, we'd really like you to serve on this special committee. And sometimes it has to be special, not just a host committee. Sometimes you may have both a host committee for the general public people, and then you have this like special 5-person made up committee that allows people to raise a significant amount of money. They have to commit. It's a $10,000 give get, or it's a $25,000 give get, and you're going to support them in doing that. Some of them may want to just write a check, while as others may prefer to raise money through their network by doing a list and reaching out and being more creative. Talking a mile a minute here, but we're almost done, and Christine's going to take over, and it'll be a lot more pleasant, I promise you. And then the last piece is your board and advisory board. Now, these people have been involved. We all know a lot of them are not doing what they're supposed to do. One thing I will say, she's probably going to hit on this too, is you got to make sure you have critical deliverables. The board members, when they are onboarded, need to know what they're responsible for, and they need to sign off on it in some sort of document. With a letter and an actual nomination form, and they're signing that they understand what their responsibilities are to be on your board. So some of those responsibilities are participating in events and supporting those events. So we want to remind them, we want to help them. And what's really critical, I'll give you one example, and I've used this example in the past, so some of you may have heard this, but we had a board member sitting on the board that didn't realize that he was in a position where he could make a huge impact on an event. He didn't know that. He just was a very senior level person, had a lot of vendors and partners. So what we did was we put him in a role of a co-chair. We realized he had a lot of potential. We talked to him about it. He still didn't understand it. And we said, is it okay if we just make you a co-chair of this event? He agreed, as long as it didn't take a lot of his time. So we asked him a couple of very basic questions. One question was, do you have vendors that you work with in your business? He's like, yeah, I have like 10 or 11 vendors. So that's great. I said, okay, would you be okay if I crafted an email and a letter for you with an attachment, and you reviewed it, made it work for you, and then we pushed it out to those 11 people? And that's all I'm going to ask you to do. If you'd like to do more, that'd be great, but if not, we're okay with it. So he did do that, and he raised $80,000 for the event. He was blown away. We were obviously blown away. And he then realized where he was sitting. And for the next couple of years, he was able to raise $250,000. Actually, within 12 months, he raised $250,000 for that organization. And he was sitting on the board, but untapped. So you have to see who your board members are. You have to realize what the opportunities are. And then, yeah, so it's just critical. And then everyone can help in other ways, from in-kind donations for an auction. Not everyone, many people work at companies that could be approached for sponsorship, matching gift. These are all things that need to be thought through and mentioned to the individuals as they're going through it. And if you have food and beverage donations possible, there are a lot of different ways people can participate. Even if they can't bring in big sponsors and big donors, they might be able to do other things. I'm going to stop talking because I think my slides are done, and Christine is going to take over.
Christine, I'm sorry. Before you start, I just want to reiterate something that Darren mentioned, and it's so important. It is really important to onboard your board members accordingly with set expectations. And it's also important to find out what their skills are when you're talking to them. And really, I think, I'm obviously preaching to the choir. You will know more just from a conversation with a board member about their life than you would asking them exactly what their skill set is. But you are able to track that. And then, like Darren said, that's when you're able to figure out where they may be able to help support you in your events. So, Darren, I think that's a great point that you made. It's so important that we all know that we lose board members when they're not sure how they can contribute. So thank you for mentioning that. Christine, on to you.
Amen, Allison. Darren, thank you so much for the helpful visuals. I think the wheels are probably turning in many folks' heads about events that they have on the horizon or events for the spring, because having Darren's company as a partner, or simply knowing more of these best practices to employ for your upcoming events, will make a huge difference. So I hope you had a lot of valuable takeaways there. And what Allison just reinforced is a perfect segue into what I'm going to cover, which is the top 6 ways to leverage your board members. And there's so much overlap in these audiences. Many of the audiences Darren just referenced in his org chart that are tied to events, you can also use these practices to grow those relationships and grow your fundraising outcomes. One of the follow-up resources I will share from following this webinar through the NRH is a relationship building template worksheet. It's a one-pager that I often introduce at board retreats when facilitating, and it gets to the heart of what Allison was just referencing. So I really hope you find that template helpful, and there's many ways you can introduce it. So let's kick this off. I'm just going to go through a top 6 on this webinar because we have limited time, and we also want to make sure that if you do have questions, you can get them into the chat or the Q&A, and Allison will jump in and let us know we should answer something. So please ask those questions if you have them. So tip 1, Darren referenced this as well. Recruit fundraising-oriented board members, right? This goes back to clearly communicating those expectations. And there's a number of ways to do this. And I know there could be some of you saying, well, we have the old guard of board members, and now we're making this shift. And how do we bring, the old guard up to speed on the new expectations? And it really does come down to communication. And there's several best practices in terms of how you can have folks sign off on that, what you really need to communicate with your board members, and letting them know, as Darren said, events are a key part of participation. And what does that mean when you agree to serve on the board? Be as clear as you can in terms of those role descriptions that you have for your board members. And if you're sitting and saying, but we don't have a role description for our board members on file, it's never too late to go through the year in terms of markers to introduce these best practices, reevaluate what you expect of your board members. And for the purposes of this webinar, really making sure that your folks recognize that fundraising is a part of their board service. Now, does that mean you are going to be asking folks for more and more money and having them dig into their own pockets? Not necessarily. And that's what the heart of this talk is really all about. So tip number 2, building on setting clear expectations. It's not more from the individual. It's about examining the individual's networks. A lot of what Darren and Allison just referenced, and really thinking about how you can leverage your board members. So when you have your board agreement, are you including things like, we would like you to make a personal ask for a partnership. We would like you to make an introduction to a potential partner. We would like you to consider hosting an intimate event, right? Put out the idea. There's something that will resonate with each person differently. Some people are kind of excited to have people in their home and host and talk about a mission. Others that couldn't be farther from something they would be comfortable doing. So how can you kind of put out a menu or get the wheels turning among your board members, whether it's in a retreat setting or whether it's during a mission moment agenda item where you're kind of opening up their minds to new ways that they can get involved, but also making it clear that there are certain expectations and they have choices in order to be involved in your fundraising strategy.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that, Christine, I think it's a really critical piece for doing major events is having some sort of kickoff event. And it can be very small and intimate. It's usually, there's no cost to attend it. And it either, like you said, could be hosted by somebody, or it could be someone's connection is willing to help. And there may be a little bit of an expense to the charity, but it's worth it. And it's a chance for those board members to bring 2 or 3 people that they're not sure how to approach, but they'd like to invite them so they can learn more, hear from the executive director, learn from the board chair, hear from a doctor or an expert in the field. And it's not a lot of talking. It's like a 10 to 15 minutes of talking. It's a 2-hour event at the most. And it's just like beer and wine and a little hors d'oeuvres, so it shouldn't be expensive. And someone has to just host, give you a space. But it is critical and it can be very valuable. You open a lot of new doors.
Absolutely. That's where the magic happens, right? When real relationships are formed in an authentic way. And a lot of board members are sitting on these opportunities and haven't been asked or don't realize. I'll go to the next slide for tip number 3 here. Training and support. But before I do that, when I was at a board retreat recently, I had a board member say, wait, just by simply making an introduction, this could help the organization. They kind of felt that it was all on their shoulders to close a deal, if you will. And it was this kind of epiphany for them, very busy business folks. thinking they had to kind of see something through to fruition, when really all the CEO was asking for was a warm introduction. And so that moment was big for that organization because there was that list of 11 vendors in that board member's head, and thinking they had to spend more time than they had, that was now reduced to those introductory emails that Darren referenced earlier, and really being able to make those connections. All right, that being said, tip number 3 is provide training and support, because we can't expect board members to really know what it means to be a nonprofit board member. We offer a lot of education through NRH around your legal duties, what it means to be in compliance as a board member, a lot of really important responsibilities. And so along those lines, we at our company always emphasize offering various educational resources. And so this is no different when it comes to fundraising. So how can you arm your board members with access to these different resources to begin feeling more comfortable to do the outreach that speaks to them? So there's so much in terms of free webinars online right now. You're listening to one. There are so many things you could kind of circulate to your board members that are tailored to your area of the nonprofit space and have them feel more comfortable in reaching out. At BellesBoard, we have something forward-facing on our website that's called an AI-powered fundraising coach, where you can grab a template message to send a thank you note to a donor. You can grab a template message to introduce your organization to a new potential partner. Just language like that to make it easier for board members to kind of plug and play and adapt and not have to feel intimidated by crafting that kind of messaging. All right, 4, leveraging personal networks. We cannot emphasize this enough. And again, not every board member has this top of mind when they're serving. So part of the relationship building worksheet that I go through with boards, it actually says, please list your top 3 skill sets that you feel could help this organization. Please list your top 3 social circles that you're involved in. And that could just be, literally, who do you hang out with? Where do you feel passionate? Where do you enjoy your life? And it's so interesting when a board member says something like, oh, right, I guess I'm also in the philanthropy circle of my company, where there's 30 other connections of folks who are actually inclined to want to give back, but not really recognizing in their board seat at another organization that that's relevant, or that could be helpful to share the message. So a lot of kind of stating the obvious, but it's not, right? If you're serving on a board and you're at a networking event and you go around to introduce yourself, how often do you mention your board service at that particular nonprofit? We are always encouraging, when you do your introduction, you're not just the CEO of accounting company XYZ. And also, I serve on the board of this organization because this mission is important to me, and here's why. So a lot of different ways to incorporate board service, consider those personal networks, and make those introductions. Darren, do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, just think someone says they belong to a country club, or they play tennis with a group, or they're whatever. I love that question, Christine. It's a good one, and I don't use it as much as we should. So we'll be incorporating that into our dialogue. But I do think people are not thinking that way. So you have to show them, like, some of this may seem, to me, a lot of this sounds basic because I do this for a living. But when I talk to my good friends and I mention it, they're like, look at me like I have 2 heads. I'm like, I don't understand what's so complicated. They just don't think that way. They're not thinking these basic steps we're telling you to take are critical, and you have to walk people through them. If you do, it'll open up doors that you didn't think were possible.
Absolutely. And the nature of board service is it's typically episodic. If you're a really established organization, maybe you're gathering quarterly. If you're a working board, maybe you're gathering monthly. In either case, you're not on a day-to-day basis considering a mission and what you could be doing to make connections. So that's why when you have this precious time together through a morning retreat, or just, again, adding that agenda item to each meeting, it can really make all the difference in tapping into more connections and benefits to your fundraising bottom line. Next is stewardship activities. This, again, for Darren, this is his day-to-day. He lives and breathes this. This is him actually making calls along with his large team at Powered by Professionals. But you might have board members who check off on this fundraising worksheet. One of the options would be, I am interested in inviting someone in for a tour, inviting someone to our next signature event. I am interested in calling a prospect and thanking them for XYZ. I'm interested in calling a new donor and saying thank you personally from this organization. It goes so much farther when you have this buy-in from your stakeholders, like board members or other audiences, to receive that call. I have seen these calls really bloom into meaningful conversations that lead that donor to want to do more, because then they inevitably find out why that board member is serving and why this mission connects with them, and they learn more about the impact of the organization. So I, take these batches of worksheets following a retreat and see who checked off they would be willing to send an email or thank you, or make a thank you phone call to a donor. And it's always more folks than you would consider. And sure, if you're a fundraising director, you might say, well, I don't want everyone calling. I don't know if this person should be making that call. But there are certain to be folks who've not tapped into in that way, who could make that call and really grow your outcomes.
Christine, I hate to interrupt, but we do have a question that is
Oh.
pretty timely to what you're saying. How can we motivate board members who may be hesitant or feel unprepared to participate actively in fundraising? Do you have an example of training or resources that have helped board members embrace a fundraising role? Do you want me to
go
put that in
first,
the
Darren, or
chat?
do you want me to?
Yeah, maybe just repeat it. I was trying to follow.
Yeah, it's a doozy. Hold on.
The good
And I'm
one.
putting in the
Actually,
chat.
motivate
How
board
can we
members.
motivate board members who may be hesitant or feel unprepared to participate actively in fundraising? We'll start with that one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's what a lot of what I do, and I think probably all of you do, is you got to ask a lot of questions. You got to understand, why is it that they feel hesitant? What do they feel unprepared about? Sometimes people think they need to know more than they need to know. So I think it's important to understand what the situation is. Like, even yesterday, we had a call with a potential organization, and I asked like 5 questions, and they talked for like 30 minutes, and they told us everything that we needed. Because if you don't really understand what the problem is or what the issue is, you can't really solve the problem. And it may be nothing, that they just don't understand the process, and understanding the process will make them more comfortable. Do you have examples of training or resources that have helped board members embrace a fundraising role? Christine, I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
touch
I
on.
mean, so I would say, just to first address the first part, leading with education helps. You're arming people with information, right? Which gets to what Darren mentioned, like, what is the hesitation? What is why isn't the motivation being tapped into? Is there a disconnect with the organization, the mission, with the programs, with what information do you need? Where is that roadblock? But in terms of examples, I have seen organizations make breakthroughs in a board retreat setting, because you're letting folks know that bite-sized steps can make a big impact. And it's breaking down that perception that you do have to close the deal, for example, like I mentioned earlier, or that you do have to make a hard ask for money, or that you as a board member may feel you're responsible to give more than you're able. But there's an array of possibilities to how you can be impactful, that board members are often unaware of. So I think when you introduce things in bite-sized pieces, when you have consistent communication about the impact of the mission, that's where you can really see that motivation grow. I have also seen organizations add that mission moment to board meetings and come back and tell me over and over, this has really made our board meeting so much more effective, because we have the element of mission impact in every meeting. It's not just approving the minutes, approving a budget. It's, why are we here? And it could be, it's no more than 4 or 5 minutes of a recent achievement related to the mission.
There's a lot of questions. I don't know if you want to keep answering them, or if you want to do the last slide and then we'll answer them. But
yeah, I think, why don't I just do tip 6 and then we can open it up. I don't have the chat open, so I have no.
Okay,
I don't know
yeah.
how many are
I
noticing.
can kind of start the questions too. I have once you're done.
Okay, yeah, this is great. Thanks so much, everyone, for asking questions. We have plenty of time to answer them, which is great. So I'll just close with tip 6, which is to be consistent with effective communication. This goes for all of our work. And I cannot tell you how many times I'm helping with a strategic plan, we're helping with more effective board management, and there's a communication breakdown that needs to be addressed. And, we have different personalities in the mix, and there's so many nuances here. But I can't stress enough to figure out a way to communicate more effectively with your board. And there's a lot of different ways you can consider that. I mentioned just a moment ago about communicating about your impact. We should also be in communication about your overall fundraising strategy. So that's a great topic for a retreat or a great recurring update. Here's where we're headed. Here's your role in that, and helping board members feel accountability, because so much of what Darren referenced was about feeling belonging in terms of event planning, feeling a sense of purpose by being on a committee, by feeling you have a role that is valued. And so board members need to feel this over time. And if they feel like they're just showing up to check off a box and they don't know where to go to access the resources, or they feel that they don't have the right support to really go out and make that donor phone call, then they get trepidation. So how can we continue to really make them feel supported and find out what they need? And that could be different for board members depending on their background and where they see their skill sets being utilized. So that's what I will leave you with. And then Darren or Allison, let's see what questions we have.
So one of the questions was, with limited resources, how can we prioritize our efforts to maximize our fundraising ROI? One thing that I recommend is that you really you need to understand who are potentially your largest donors within the organization, especially if you have limited resources. And those people have to get a lot of attention. For an example that even overlaps with one of Christine's, I think, fifth point, was that we just took 2 honorees down to the Diabetes Research Institute. This is just, I keep saying diabetes, but it happens to be that time of year for us. And we flew down to Miami for literally like a 6-hour thing. And we walked them through the institute so they could meet doctors, hear about the cutting edge research going on, the trials that are happening, and give them a little one-on-one time in the lab with under the microscope, all that. And it was so impactful to see their interest level through the roof now. They feel connected, they feel a part of it, they have access to the doctors if they have questions. So that was an example of, we don't have like tons of big donors, so you took a couple down, you gave them that VIP treatment, and it might be going to dinner with them, it might be taking them somewhere like this example, but I think that's one piece. And then another question that was on here. Slide this thing. Can I slide this thing? Yeah, here we go. Was about a lot of questions here. What would you know? Are there specific areas within fundraising where small nonprofits should focus first to see the greatest return? What I would say to that is that all of this comes down to people, right? So if you're a small nonprofit, how big is your board? Number one, do you have a 5-person board, a 7-person board, a 9-person board, 11-person board? You may need to add board members, and going through the process that Christine was talking about is critical, because if you get new board members, you create now new opportunities, new networks, and new people to go through. That doesn't mean your organization is going to get out of control because you have an extra 2 board members, but it may open some new doors. So that's another way for smaller organizations to grow. I don't know if Christine wants to add anything on either of those.
Yeah, I would say starting with that board in the beginning, if you're in that state where you have that working board, but revisiting that role description is really key. What are you asking these core members to do, and how does that really get you to your strategic goals? So I always try to say, no matter what you're referring to about your organization, it should all go back to where you want to be in 1, 2, and 3 years. So having some sort of collective goals, and then taking a look at your stakeholders, including your board, and seeing how do these folks lend themselves to these efforts, and then who are we missing? So there's a great exercise called the board matrix, where you can quickly get a full view of the skill sets that are represented and the ones that are missing, and representation that's there and that's missing. It doesn't mean you're going to fix that overnight, but you can at least have collective targets in mind for where you want to grow and round out your board initially. And then there's a lot of ways to set up recurring giving. options and sort of set yourself up for automation as you're growing that are low cost. So there's a lot of technology solutions that can also support that kind of consistent growth. But I think Darren made the great point. You have to prioritize, the example of prioritizing the 2 key donors to grow their networks. You can really go viral with the right network, that right family foundation contact, that right influencer. But again, we're not sugarcoating it. It's hard work to find the right relationship for your organization. But by really putting the time in to target where your mission resonates and finding that fit and finding, one of our partners, Ken Serini, has this great partnership with the book fairs. Why? Because literacy is important to Ken, the leader of the accounting firm, and they were able to come up with a great method for every book equals dollars, and committing to that to move that organization's mission forward. So it takes time to find those critical partner fits, but having that top of mind and identifying it as a goal will get you there faster.
Definitely. Thank you, Christine. That was very helpful. And then the technology, we talk about technology. We didn't talk a lot about technology today, but there are a lot of tools out there to make everything more seamless, more easier for the board member, for the volunteer to use to effectively effectively raise dollars and communicate with their networks and track that communication. So leveraging technology in different ways, having tools at these events that allow people to easily give. And those companies that are out there are coming up with ways to make it even simpler. So it's a tap. It's not just you have to fill out the whole form. You don't have to fill out paper anymore. We were on a call yesterday with somebody of a chair of a board who's been the chair of this event. And she's like, yeah, last year's event, they had paper, check, and still for their auction. And we're just so past that. Why are they doing that? That was like a miss. So, we have an event tomorrow night, I should say, and, we'll have technology leveraged throughout that event. All the auction has been sent out in advance. People have it on their phones. The 1,000 people that couldn't come tomorrow night will at least be able to bid from wherever they are, even if they can't attend the event. And with people working from home and not attending as much, these are new obstacles. So you have to find ways to communicate with a larger audience. And that's one way to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. There's so much to tackle here. And I think especially if you're a smaller organization and your head is kind of spinning, it's really thinking about, okay, you don't need to be on every social media platform. Let's think about the ones that actually target our audience and start there. Let's not try to tackle every component of a fundraising strategy at the onset, but hone in that strategy and make sure that your key folks on your executive team and your board are aware of what those key markers are for success so that you're making progress together. I see this good question in the chat here in terms of recommendations. If you're facing a decline in revenue, what adjustments would you recommend? That's a big one. I mean, I would say if you're not following the steps to have a postmortem or a debrief following your events that really in a timely fashion identify what worked well and what didn't, don't discount that, the importance of having that conversation, because that sets you up to continue to improve and see where your dollars were spent, and what got you the most ROI versus where you're falling short, in terms of efficiencies, but also in terms of spending. I don't know, Darren, you're an expert in events, and you've seen organizations year on year, and then we're coming off of COVID still, but that was like a big hole and then building back up again. But the events landscape has significantly changed over the past several years. So I know I see a lot of organizations completely thinking of different formats for their events as they explore how to have an event on a lower budget, but looking at higher ROI and a lot of different models for that.
Yeah, so you got to understand why is it going in that direction? What are the trends that you're seeing within your group, your organization, because yours may be different than what's happening overall. And being aware of what's happening, like, not having an event on a Friday night if no one's in the city on a Friday, for example. Or, what are days people are now working in the city less days a week. So can you plan strategically with that in mind? Having these smaller events maybe what you need to revamp and re-energize your organization so that you can get new people. It's all about people. So if your people are dwindling, you need to find a way to get new people involved. Doing a big event is not the easiest way to do that. Sometimes you have to start with a couple of smaller events leading up to a bigger event. And in those smaller events, maybe identifying people that could be honored, play a bigger role, and do things like that, and maybe have interest in your cause because it was an intimate setting.
See this other question here. With technology constantly evolving, which platforms or tools do you see as most effective for streamlining fundraising efforts and improving ROI? What I will say broadly is that we're lucky to be in partnership with BellesBoard as part of the Social Good Startup program for this year. And what that's really opened up our eyes to are some really incredible cutting edge, but also time-tested solutions to consider along the lines of making sure your matching gifts process is quick and easy to navigate. Different ways to engage with companies to encourage more corporate social responsibility, engaging entire employee bases with your mission, and how can you consider those types of relationships? I mentioned before about recurring donations. You know, if your organization does not have an easy way for someone to sign up for a monthly or recurring gift, immediately address that, because people are open to that. If your mission has resonated with someone and they are at that point to give, make sure they have the option to sign up for a recurring gift. And make sure your donor management software works for you as well in terms of managing these relationships over time and being more efficient in how you communicate with your donor base. I don't know, Darren, we could talk for hours about the donor engagement cycle and the life cycle of communication and consistency, but that's a really important piece to evaluate as well. If you're experiencing challenges, make sure your solutions are supporting your organization in the right way and consider to plan for changes if not.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you hit on the head. I'm big on giving people a little bit of time back in their day because I know what my days are like. Allison, I know you asked about the trends. You're on mute, Allison. Can't hear you.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. It looks like Tracy Ann Rose raised her hand, but I'm not sure if that was accidentally or if she has a. But can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but
Okay, it said it was. I said I had it unmuted. It looks like Tracy Ann has her hand raised, but I don't see a question from her, so I'm not sure if that's
okay.
if she has a question. So Tracy Ann, if you have a question, please put it into the chat. Okay, Darren, I didn't mean to jump
Yeah,
in
so
there.
we were going to wrap up in a minute, but just because to give people a few minutes back in their day. But as we move into 25, are there any trends, concerns to the group should be aware of, or in terms of fundraising or events? You know, it's been an interesting fall going through everything with the election and with stuff going around the world. So I think I'm actually anxious to see how nonprofits bounce back from that and kind of get people's attention again. And hopefully some of that noise is no longer going on. And you have to be embracing technology still. I know we've been saying that for 10 years, but that's something I would just stress. Okay, last question, then we're gonna wrap it up. From the group, piggybacking off the previous question, what are some strategies to engage the board to push the mission of the nonprofit beyond fundraising? Christine, you want
Well, I
to?
would say my initial reaction to that is when you lead with authenticity around the impact rather than fundraising, you tend to get to a better outcome. You know, so I know it's hard to say it's the long game, but that's really what relationship building is. And that's really what our team tries to make an impact around when we help you mobilize your board to forge various relationships. And ultimately that all ties back to the mission, excuse me. So within that messaging, you're consistently reinforcing your organization's impact. So I think leading with impact, leading with your why, that's one of my favorite exercises to do at various meetings of board members. Your why now, your why then. Why did you join this board? Why does this mission resonate with you? I think if you lead with that in your communication, then you'll have someone ask you, well, how can I help? How can I get involved? And at that point, you have the entree to talk about the fundraising strategy as a whole and see where they could fit. So just be sure to work in partnership with your development directors around the full strategy rather than, feeling like the pressure is on you as a stakeholder to make those hard asks.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you
Yeah, let's
both
wrap up.
so very much. If you have any questions, we have a slide here where you can reach out directly to Darren and Christine. If for some reason you are unable to get a hold of them, just contact us and we'll make sure we connect you with them. I want to thank the group for the questions. I want to thank you both for a really great presentation. We're moving into 2025, like you said, Darren. We're going to see how things go and how things shape up. But I just want the group to know that you have access to Darren and Christine to help support you through this. So please take advantage of that, as well as the Nonprofit Resource Hub. I linked in with all of you. Please link in with one another. You will receive a recording of this. You'll get a follow-up letter from our office. Just give us a couple of days so we can polish it up for you. And if you have any questions, please again reach out. And I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I'm going to wish everybody happy holidays at this point. So thank you all. Darren, Christine, do you have any last words to say, or we're good?
So a big thank you to you, Allison, and the Nonprofit Resource Hub, and Christine. It's great working with you like always, and looking forward to hopefully helping a number of the people here. If anyone wants to do a 15-minute call just to catch up and ask some questions, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I would just
All right.
echo Darren. Thank you for making the time. We know you have a lot of choices in how you spend your time and where you get information. So we're grateful that you spent it with us. And please reach out. Allison is amazing at the Nonprofit Resource Hub. And so if you have not joined and you're a nonprofit, Allison said it is free for nonprofits to join and get this information consistently. So thank you so much, everyone.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you.